he has called you and said, I'm being blackmailed. What the hell do I do? They're asking for millions.
And the key questions are who, what, why, when, and how. Who are they? What are they doing? When did they do it? How are they doing it? And what can we do to shut it down? I suppose the most recent case was an individual that had made the mistake in making a video that he shouldn't have made, which got into the hands of an individual that blackmailed him then for that information.
How do I know if I'm being followed?
Observing if you can see the same vehicles in and around you all the time. Maybe you see the same people nearby regularly, maybe over a period of a course of days. But equally, there can sometimes be a level of paranoia amongst some people that they're being followed by people that they really aren't. Client arrived in Singapore, stopped by customs, pulled aside, bag searched. Inside the lining of his suitcase, 90 grams of cocaine, huge amount. And in Singapore, it's a big problem. He had been set up. If this investigation falls over and he's found guilty, he will be executed. Within about 3 or 4 weeks, we had somebody we thought was responsible.
Hello and welcome to the GVE London podcast, and today we're being joined by Oliver Laurence, who is an award-winning private investigator. He works for a company called IonAsia and has the craziest scenarios that he has to deal with on a weekly basis, be it extortion or a billionaire getting kidnapped or just recovering supercars from abroad. Such an interesting podcast. Here's how it went.
How do I know if I'm being followed?
Well, that's a very good question, and one we would often call a sort of counter-surveillance understanding. So observing if you can see the same vehicles in and around you all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe you see the same people nearby regularly, maybe over a period of a course of days. So imagine if you pass someone in the street and you see them once during the day, in London as an example, there is unless you work in the same sort of environment, you sort of recognise that person from a working environment. But if they're a total stranger, I would suggest if you see somebody more than once or maybe a couple of times in the same day and they just look a bit odd, I would suggest that, maybe you've got a very good reason to feel that they could be up to no good or they are following you. But equally, there can sometimes be a level of paranoia amongst some people that they're being followed by people that they really aren't.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting question. I don't think there's any given theory.
Well, typically, you've got to have done something stupid to have that paranoia that you're being followed. Right?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people that worry that they're being surveilled, listened to, followed, bugged, whatever the case may be, generally are fairly nervous because maybe they've been up to no good. For those of us that are just going about our normal daily life, unless you live the life that I do in terms of sort of the level of risk, in terms of the investigations I carry out, I have a high level of paranoia, but I think mine is justified.
Justified, right? But typically, you're the one that's doing the following and the surveillance. And so give us an example of a recent case where you've had to follow somebody.
So there's a number of different scenarios where we use those tactics at IonAsia, where we feel surveillance gives us the best opportunity to gather the sort of evidence and information that we need to find someone. I suppose the most recent case was an individual that had made the mistake in making a video that he shouldn't have made, which got into the hands of an individual that blackmailed him then for that information. So then as a result of that, we move into a very fast-paced moving environment to try and A, identify who these people are, and then B, watch their movements. What are they doing? So we have often the key questions are who, what, why, when, and how. Who are they? What are they doing it? What are they doing? When did they do it? How are they doing it? And what can we do to shut it down?
So in this case...
So in this case, we had 7 people under surveillance at one point, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because they're opening offshore bank accounts.
Wow.
They're blackmailing the client over the use of mobile phones. So we want to
I'm guessing the client was very rich.
Correct.
He's made a video.
Correct.
Now, I think we can leave it to the audience's imagination what kind of video.
It's probably a good idea.
Right? So he's made a video that he shouldn't have made.
Correct.
With somebody he shouldn't have been with.
Potentially.
And then somehow this criminal or opportunist has managed to capture that video,
Yeah.
and then use it against him. So I'm sure a lot of people have had spam email. Hey, I've seen, I've got some video of you or something like that. Right?
Yeah.
And if you can send 0.5 Bitcoin to this address, we'll take it down. Or
That's almost like that, identical to this scenario.
Oh, really?
Almost identical to the scenario in terms of cryptocurrency. Crypto is one of those things which has taken over the world of the nefarious in some regard, because it's a way of remaining almost untraceable to some extent.
To some extent, right?
I think that's getting better and better each day as we get more and more used to it. But this was the exact scenario. Cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, was the method of choice here. And again, an opportunistic individual that saw a chance to make money. And there is, a lot of my clients that I look after who have got wealth and public profile aren't necessarily ever worried about court processes anymore. It's about public image. It's about what appears on the first few pages of Google. Nobody wants to see a website or an image or a YouTube video or a TikTok video of them either behaving badly or in this vulnerable position, because their reputations mean so much to them. Right. And that can be gone in an instant.
Well, that person, I'm guessing he's not just a millionaire. He's into the hundreds of millions.
Well, what you and I would call ultra high net worth.
Which is billions, probably, right?
It's up there.
It's up there. And so, for example, on that one, he has called you and said, I'm being blackmailed. What the hell do I do?
Yeah.
They're asking for millions. I'm assuming that the initial, demand was give us millions and we'll take the video down, right? And he's had to call you in because I suppose if he doesn't get professionals involved and does send the millions, which is probably, not much for him in theory, right? But he would never know if tomorrow they just come back and say, here you go. Now we're going to do it again, and we're going to do it again.
Correct. Right? That is the greatest risk, is the fact that you start feeding these individuals with money. They then know that you're prepared to pay for this. They've got what they need. And actually, so what happens is, the initial communication is almost like a proof of life image, a still, a part of this video, which has appeared, which they've got to show you they've got the content. And the blackmail is, if I don't get X by a certain date, it's going to appear on the internet and I'll share the link everywhere. And, you can buy domain names and you can register them with cryptocurrency now with very little knowledge. You can send an email with a Proton email account. Again, very little backtrace to anybody individually, and cause absolute chaos. So, and quite often, it's actually not the clients that reach out directly to us. They reach out to an aide who says, I've got a problem. All these people have got confidants, who they reach out to. And they say, we can't do this by ourselves. We need experts. And that's when...
And so they get a fixer, which is basically you, right?
Well, yeah, our firm is now, we've been around since the early 2000s. And, my boss, Derek Elmer, and my colleague in New York, James Dunky, and I have solved an awful lot of problems around the world for very important people. And I think that's because we are quite relaxed. We're well networked, well synced in every jurisdiction just about. And we remain relaxed and take the clients on that journey of solving that problem.
But with this specific case, right? So you've been called, you've had to fly out wherever this guy is. You've got 7 people, on surveillance at any given time.
Correct.
What happened?
So we're building in the background a whole criminal case to prove that the client is being extorted. So the jurisdiction we're working is critical, which was in Australasia. So once we're gathering all the evidence to a criminal standard, we're then in a position to either decide whether or not we want to pursue this individual criminally, or do we want to try and make a private approach to negotiate in a roundabout way with legal teams the return of the intellectual property, to which then we won't press charges. And there's a very fine balance there in terms of making sure that we don't commit the same type of offence in reverse. So it's really important. We're not sort of rogue agents here. We're working with incredibly skilled and highly qualified King's counsels and huge law firms across the world who are helping us execute these plans. So ultimately, we come up with the investigative and intelligence strategy to support the legal strategy getting to a positive outcome.
Is this one concluded yet or not?
Yeah, all done and dusted. Yeah,
so all done and dusted. So, was it a kid?
No, like a youngster, early 20s, who was opportunistic, like you said.
Suddenly this 20-year-old comes across this video, realizes who it is. It's like, shit, I can make millions out of this, right? So he tries to extort him.
Yeah.
Mr. Billionaire calls you, you fly out.
Yeah.
And so you were doing surveillance on these 7 people.
Yeah, gathering the evidence.
How did you nip this in the bud?
Do you know, the interesting thing is while this whole matter was going on, this young man was spending the money before he'd even received it. He was test driving BMW Z4s. He was going and looking at Ferraris. Yeah. You know, he was living it up. You know, he was like, you know, it's coming. I can smell it. You know, the money is going to come down the wire almost daily. And I suppose how we resolved it is we did, I suppose, what we described as a private intervention, where we just purely went and had a conversation. Yeah. You know, very gently, very quietly. This is who we are. This is what we've been doing, with a script, which has been checked off by lawyers, and ultimately enter into an agreement to which we'll get back the client's IP, with a few conditions in terms of us making sure that there haven't been any copies been made, so that we can, you know, reassure the client that we've resolved the matter.
And did the guy get a payout? Yeah.
No payout, but you know, we came to an agreement in terms of electronic devices being replaced with brand new ones. You know, he did all right. Yeah. But the client's prepared to do what's ever necessary to ensure the guarantee that footage is no longer out there.
Well, I'm sure I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of a billionaire's wrath, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, but these entrepreneurs are very clever individuals, understand the dynamics and are negotiators, and they appreciate you've got to give a bit to get a bit. And that's sort of the world we're in. And, you know, as an advisors, and you know, we're talking about crisis management here. You know, when you're advising around crisis, it's not just that individual, it's the family as well. So, you know, it's a whole piece. It's looking out for everyone's interest, because these are high pressure, high stakes, emotively driven matters. You know,
again, the guy would have had a hefty bill if his missus found out.
There is that part. Yeah.
So how does one become a private investigator?
Do you know, I'll be honest with you, I absolutely can't stand that saying, because when you hear the word private investigator, you think a trench coat, newspaper with eye holes cut out of it, or a pair of binoculars, and it all sounds quite nefarious. You know, it's the second time I've used that word. But so, you know, I call myself a corporate investigator, and again, as you say, you know, I'm known around the parts as a bit of a fixer, solving these big problems, you know, but it's not just me, this entire enormous company behind me that helps me and supports me and provides the infrastructure to the success that we will have. But how do you get involved in it? Well, I come from a very classical policing background. So I was a police officer in Australia for 12 years, left policing in 2016, did a couple of years with the government doing some other work. And then I found this world of the rich and the famous and the problems that come with it, and I was just drawn and intrigued by it. Gave me the same excitement as policing did in terms of the variety. No 2 days are the same. My stress levels in policing were through the roof. They still are in this role, because ultimately, you know, my number one question to most of my clients is, what keeps you up at night? And those are the problems that I try and solve, and some of those problems can be massive.
Your title then is really a fixer, right? And you got these ultra high net worth people, and you're saying to them, what keeps you up at night, and I'll fix that problem for you.
Yeah, I suppose we should caveat within reason.
Within reason, right?
You know, it is. You know,
so give us a selection of problems that you quite commonly come across.
Yeah, so, you know, we'll see of late a large amount of high-profile, high-valued vehicles leaving the UK, as an example. Really? Yeah, like G63 wagons, Rolls-Royces, you know, Dawns, Lamborghinis. You know, all these high-profile, high-valued vehicles are leaving the country. And one thing that we're getting a lot of inquiries at the moment is recovering those vehicles.
Recovering them?
Yeah, significantly. So, you know, of late, we've spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia recovering G63s.
No way.
Yeah. So clients have had their own personal trackers on those vehicles. Yeah. Those vehicles have been stolen. Trackers have still been going off. During transportation, you can see them blipping along in containers on the ocean, but they hadn't had the capacity to recover these vehicles. Yeah. And we've had a couple.
Well, the police must kind of just be like, "Oh, your car's gone, so deal with insurance, because you know what." it's out of our jurisdiction. Is that right?
Yeah, well, policing's become a bit of a tragedy at the moment, isn't it, in terms of sort of the response and expectations, you know, through people leaving. But that's another story in itself. But so you know,
surely like a Range Rover gets stolen, the police then say about, oh, well, we've had an experience of it, right? And so you call them up, it's been stolen. Okay, if you go onto this website, report the crime.
Yeah. And they just add it to the list.
Just add it.
Just add it to the list. There's another Range Rover gone. You know, that's why we can't get them insured in London at the moment, because they just keep disappearing. So you've got these really high value assets going overseas, and we're now in a position where we're being hired and instructed to recover them. Yeah. And we're having successes where we're seeing cars being moved by organised crime, organised criminals, part of organised crime syndicates, moving vehicles into Southeast Asia, and then we're being instructed to go and recover them.
Any particular countries?
Cambodia, Vietnam.
Oh, really?
Yeah, hugely. Okay. And you know, these are expensive cars. So, and it's not just a turn up.
Any examples of any of these instances? So you said G63. Did you have to actually go out there?
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're putting teams together on cars that are valued, you know, G63, £250,000 worth of car. We're going out there and recovering those from sort of organised crime syndicates in the dead of night, because we've got spare keys, and then containering them back and out of the country quickly in the dead of night back to the UK. Yeah, it's you know, it's an increasing market.
Are flying into Cambodia, which isn't the safest place in the world.
No, it can be a bit.
Right. So I'm guessing that, you know, Southeast Asia, you've got the countries which are typically, you know, look very safe, which is Singapore, and you're probably Hong Kong.
Yeah, Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea.
It looks very safe.
Yeah.
But then Cambodia looks like...
Yeah, Cambodia, Vietnam,
you could probably get shot if you do anything stupid, right?
Yeah, within reason.
I mean, you know,
I think where you struggle is where you can struggle is sort of the rule of law and interpretation and jail times, and the quality of the treatment you receive is probably something that one would want to be careful about.
So you and your team have flown out because the G63 has been stolen and it's been containerized and it's gone down to Cambodia. You've landed, and then because you've got tracker data which tells you where it's sitting right now.
Correct.
You've gone and you've done surveillance on the property where it's at.
Correct.
And then?
So then you remove the vehicle.
Because you had the spare key?
Correct. You lock it down for a couple of weeks until everything sort of calms down.
Wow.
And then when you've got the logistics together and you've got the support in country, and you know what, there is, in essence, a level of reporting with law enforcement who will support you.
Oh, really?
Yeah. These aren't sort of rogue operations. When we find a stolen car, we're able to present the papers and show them a case. We'll get support. You know, and that's part of that network and that contact base through Cambodia, through Southeast Asia and across Asia. So, and I think that's important to have, is that, you know, law enforcement agencies will recognise that and will support you. And, you know, it's part of the network that we maintain because there are problems we need help fixing.
But you're not nervous when you're out in Cambodia and you know that you have to get that G-Wagon without anybody noticing you.
Very, but you have
like a criminal gang chasing you down the road.
Well, your local help is important. You know, you can't. I don't look in any way, shape, or form Cambodian. I don't speak Cambodian, so it's important for us to make sure that although we've come up with the plan, to execute that plan, we need good people on the ground. And you know, with IonAsia's presence across that region for the past 20 years, that network is formidable. And that's why people come to say, listen, I've got this problem, surely you've got the network to help. And 9 times out of 10, we do.
And so you got the car, you stuck it back in a container, and
correct. So you bring it back in, and then you obviously explain to customs.
No close calls.
No, you know, there's always some moments where you take a deep breath, and there's nothing more nerve-wracking than removing a car from a secure unit complex, where if somebody wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning and sees their car roaring down the street. But you know, we try to do everything quite quietly. This isn't bang crash. This is very quietly, very thought through. Backup plans in place.
No explosions or anything.
No, no. No smoke grenades, no stun grenades. It's just a very well-tuned team of people.
No tranquilizer darts or anything like that.
No, not qualified.
No.
That course is
that would be quite cool, though.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be.
Yeah. Do you not have like a briefcase full of gadgets?
Yeah, do you know, well, last time I was here with Bruce doing the demonstration on covert cameras.
Oh, yeah.
And the evolution in covert cameras from coffee cups to smoke alarms to Apple iPhone chargers, the evolution of gadgets.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's very cliche, it's very James Bond.
So how big is a covert camera?
well, they can be as no bigger than an iPhone charger stand that you stick your phone onto, or a coffee cup with the lid which has got the camera in it, a smoke detector. These things aren't big, and they can record for up to like 36 hours. Their batteries can go for months.
Wow.
This stuff is really advanced now. The gear that's coming out of Asia and being developed is just phenomenal, and you can put it into like a normal setting, and you and I wouldn't have a clue.
But have you seen those Ray-Bans that I think Facebook teamed up with, right? Have you seen that?
Yeah, with the camera in the lenses.
With the camera in the just on the side of the lenses.
It's incredible. So, and I must admit, I used a pair of those when I was in the police. So and even the police are using them, made by Taser. If you're coming against a hostile individual, you're recording what you're seeing, which is the best evidence.
Yeah.
Really from a sort of nefarious perspective, our private client world, what our clients talk about, their dealings, who they're talking to, that's valuable IP for some people, and they'll do anything they can to get their hands on it. Yeah. Terrifying.
We've had a few guests that have come here, and we've talked on multiple occasions about how bad the car crime has become in London, if not the whole of the UK, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely an element of the government cutting the budgets for the police stations closing, and then suddenly not enough, police to manage all of this, right? And hence, like I was saying, you get a car stolen now, and you just have to fill out a form online or something. There's no, unless anything violent has happened, then they just leave it, right?
Yeah.
I've got a lot of friends from wealth that are now just moving to Dubai because they've had enough, and they just turn around and say, look, this country is just not the same place anymore.
No.
Because you can't sit at home and feel safe. You can't sit at home without the fear of somebody's going to come and nick your car at night or something like that. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's a huge reality that we're sort of fighting with, the sort of crime epidemic, and particularly around vehicle crime. If you look at the statistics around sort of, and your high-profile vehicles, your Range Rovers as an example. I think Range Rovers and G-Wagons are up there with the top two stolen. You can't insure those cars anymore in London. And if you can insure them, your premiums are up like 20, 30 or 10, 15, 20 grand in some instances. So the private individual that can afford these vehicles has had to take it upon themselves to beef up their security, to get more provisions into their vehicles to make them harder to steal. Everything from securing keys in boxes so that you can't replicate the key from outside with a coder, putting steering wheel lock after steering wheel lock. And even that's becoming more difficult because now we've got portable electrical tools where with one zip of a grinder, the thing's off in a second and the car's gone. I think the fastest speed I've seen a Range Rover disappear off a driveway is about 30 seconds from arrival to departure. And that's phenomenal. You can't plan for that. So unless your car is being locked down in an underground car park, with a bollard in front of it, it really is a bit of a tragic set of circumstances that it is at the moment, as you quite rightly point out, just out of control, which is forcing people of wealth to think, London used to be this amazing city. I've got to look elsewhere, and Dubai is one of these lucrative locations where crime is not tolerated.
It's just not tolerated.
Well, no.
And there's numerous videos on social media which show, look, I'm going to leave my wallet here, and I'm going to leave my car key here, my car's there, and I'm going to go and have a coffee somewhere else, right? And I guarantee you that by the time I come back, that the car's here, the wallet's here, not a pound's been taken out, and everything's good, right?
Yeah. Whereas here, we're releasing people now 35 days earlier than their prison sentence is finished, and people just don't go to jail anymore.
Really?
Yeah, the comparables, it's unbelievable.
Don't say that. Well, because the men's prisons are
bursting at the seams.
Seriously.
Bursting at the seams.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is scary, no?
It is scary, it's sad. You look at behind us, these amazing vehicles. The consideration is no longer, will this thing be safe? It's sort of like, what have I got to do to protect this so that I can enjoy it? It doesn't get damaged and vandalized. You see these kids on scooters. For the first time last year, we saw somebody driving a Bugatti Veyron, having crowbars smashed into sidecar just so they could get to the watch. This guy had a Patek Philippe watch on. Yeah. And you think to yourself, what's next? Like, what is it? The desperation of individuals to get hold of this property is just unbelievable.
I mean, look, I have my own views about that, actually. That's as a result of this generation that's been growing up on social media, right? So, I'm slightly older than the younger generation at the moment, but it was bad enough in my time watching MTV, and then suddenly it was just then that the cars and the flash clothes was being drilled into your head. But the good thing was it was sporadic. You switch MTV on and you switch it off, and then you don't get to see it anymore, right? Today, social media
is constant,
forcing that into your head, right? And so you've got every other post is look at my watch, look at how much I'm spending out on a night out, and this, that, and the other. So people just automatically, and especially with crypto, right? So the rise of crypto is fast money. So what happens when you get fast money? You want to spend it fast as well, and you want to spend it on all these great things, right? So this is distorted perception of how easy it is to make money, and actually I see you wearing a nice watch, I should have that watch as well, right? And so then you got these kids just
there's no longer that patience. There's no longer that patience to earn something.
Right. Where's the value in hard work?
Yeah, it's gone.
Right. They'd much rather just steal it quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
Sadly,
but it is quite sad. I mean, there was this big problem of moped thefts, right? And the fact that if somebody mugs you or does a ram raid, right, and then jumps on a moped, that the police were not allowed to then pursue them in the fear that they might end up killing that person, right?
Correct.
Because there was a case of somebody dying when there's
been a couple where kids have taken off their helmets, driven on the wrong side of the road, had collisions come off and died as a result of the pursuit.
But then I read somewhere not too long ago that then they've kind of relaxed that for the police.
Well, they have. So the police have come up with new tactics, in terms of physical contact with motorcycles to dismount these young men in the main. From when they identify and catch them, which is, to be honest with you, if you're going to be tough on crime, you've got to be tough on crime. And if these kids got to have some level of fear, that if they're going to be caught by the police, it's going to be uncomfortable. I've often described policing, and some people probably disagree with this, but it is at times a contact sport where you come into contact with people. Yeah. And sometimes that contact is full on because what you're being provided with in terms of level of resistance is high. Yeah. So I'm all for strong law and order and backing frontline cops to
100%
to deal with these kids.
Yeah. So we talked about a video getting into the wrong hands. We talked about G-Wagon going to a different country and then you having to recover it. What other scenarios do these ultra high net worths need you in?
Yeah, so I was very lucky with my colleagues in IonAsia a few years ago to support a client in Australia who had flown to Langkawi via Singapore.
Oh, yeah. In Malaysia.
Yep. Yeah. Arrived in Singapore, stopped by customs, was going to be staying overnight, stopped by customs, pulled aside, bag searched. Inside the lining of his suitcase, 90 grams of cocaine.
Oh, wow.
Huge amount. And in Singapore, big problems.
No tolerance.
It's a big problem.
Yeah.
So,
but that's a death sentence.
It is, yeah. So you're immediately in a pickle. So very poorly sellotaped into the lining of the suitcase, detained, immediately pulled to one side, charged with importing with intent to supply, remanded in custody, and then obviously you've got an Australian expat in Singapore, foreign jurisdiction. If you look back, Australian expats have been in trouble across Southeast Asia. Chappelle Corby is probably one of the most famous ones. Cannabis in the body bag, in the bodyboard bag, large amounts, which equals long periods of custody and sometimes death sentences.
But this guy,
yep.
Was he actually trying to smuggle it?
No, he wasn't. So he had been set up So he immediately reached out to his kids and said, and his family, his wife, and said, I don't know what's going on here. I didn't know this stuff was in my bag. I need your help. So the barrister in Singapore, a chap called Amarit Gill, close friend of mine, said, well, you need to get an investigator in Australia to look at this. So they reached out to 5 investigators through the night. The first 3 refused to take on the job. This guy is on death row. If this investigation falls over and he's found guilty, he will be executed.
Oh, wow.
And if you're the investigative team on the back of that, for your reputation, you're going to, I suppose the 3 that turn it down are going to say, we don't want to touch that. That could go real pear-shaped.
So he could actually, they still execute.
Yeah, still execute. Yeah, no, very much so. Yeah, it's drugs is a huge no-no.
Wow.
So I got a phone call from a friend of mine who said, listen, this job's come in. It's not my expertise. I would do it, but it's not in my sweet spot. I reckon you could help with this. So I said, yeah, for sure. I'll have a chat. The worst case scenario is, you can only help this guy. I can't do any worse than the situation he's in. So team and I were appointed, and I flew out to Singapore immediately to interview him. And obviously, I want to make sure, for the benefit of myself and for his family that are hiring me, that he's telling the truth. There is no point, if someone is facing that significant of a sentence, to waste thousands and thousands of pounds, or dollars in this case, on me to find absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and I'm guessing he was from money anyway.
He was. Again, I would consider him a high net worth individual, not ultra, just a high net worth individual, successful businessman, typical family, living in a very wealthy suburb in Sydney, and finds himself in a really, really grim situation. So, and like all those types of investigations, when you fly out there, you speak to the clients involved. And for the first time, having interviewed a lot of people that have been in trouble and knowing the body language of most crooks I've come across, I genuinely believed he'd been set up. The genuineness into which he spoke to me, the distress in his face, because when you're in Singapore on death row, you wear a certain type of garment so that they can see, so the prison officers can see that you're a death row inmate.
Wow.
So already this psychology started. If I'm in a different outfit to everybody else, I'm in effect on death row. I'm living on a concrete floor. I'm surrounded by terrorists who have been arrested and in custody and wearing the same outfit. Like, this is a pretty grim situation. So for me, it wasn't lost on me how significant of a job this was going to be. So immediately the team and IonAsia put together this very robust strategy that we would start from the inside out, trying to eliminate people around him. And we very quickly eliminated all these people, family members. We then started to look at business associates. And I asked for a series of phone accounts from 4 different people that had knowledge of the client. And I got everyone's like, yeah, no worries, we'll cooperate. I got phone records from business associates. And in one set of the phone records, which were handed over to me, I was missing 2 pages. The 2 pages of the night that he disembarked from Sydney, wheels up to fly to Singapore. Now, my hypothesis at the time was somebody has phoned ahead to let them know he's coming. Because when he landed, 2 chaps were waiting to see him. So already then, immediately, within about 3 or 4 weeks, we had somebody we thought was responsible. They had opportunity, they had motive, which is really important for us. Yeah. So what
was the motive?
Business dealings gone bad. Okay. And to get somebody removed from an environment permanently. And what greater way to do it?
Yeah.
And access to his suitcase.
But this person...
Yeah, access to his suitcase.
Had access.
Yeah, at a mutual business location, access to a suitcase, and opportunity, and the fact that we weren't provided with information. And then the reason behind the reason why we weren't provided that information, for me, just flashed up warning signs. We were then able to get hold of a laptop and do a forensic examination on a laptop, which found that a quantity of cocaine had been bought off the dark web, delivered by Australia Post, and then we found
this particular
individual, and we found we were given sighting and we were given exposure to the tape that was used to tape duct tape used to line the suitcase to put the cocaine in 2 Clipsal bags. We were able to match the tape up in a bin bag which had been thrown out.
Oh, wow.
With the tape that was inside the client's suitcase. So again, you build all that evidence up, right? And you reach out to local authorities. You say, I've got a client in death row. Someone has set him up. I need your help now. And they wanted nothing to do with it because they said, this is a jurisdictional issue. He's in Singapore. It's not our problem.
Not a problem, yeah.
So we go to Singapore and we have these conversations with the Drug Enforcement Bureau there and the barristers. We gave them the file of all our evidence, and within 48 hours of being landed back in Australia, I was told to come back and pick him up. They dropped the charges.
Way.
So, and I was very lucky. IonAsia and the team and I, on behalf of the team, I won Investigator of the Year here in the UK for saving ultimately his life.
Wow.
And what a phenomenal investigation that was.
What an amazing story. But then what happened to the guy that set
So,
him up?
returns back to Australia and then commenced quite a complex set of civil legal proceedings, which I think up until the end of last year was still ongoing.
But then what? Has he
No
been
criminal
convicted?
charges, nothing.
Oh my God.
I know.
That's just crazy, right?
It's mad. To think you
that-
can do that to someone.
Yeah, well, if he got away with it, that guy would have died.
Yeah.
He would have got what he wanted to, and jobs are good at him,
It's
right?
and there was a lot of PR around that. It was well publicised. I put together with the IonAsia team a fantastic array of people to support me in that job, and it was the best outcome was achieved. We may be frustrated, we may be angry that nobody's held accountable, but ultimately we got somebody home alive.
But were you able to put that intel out there so that people could know that this guy tried to do this even though he wasn't convicted?
Yeah, well, you can't. Yeah, you've got to be very careful in terms of unless you get a conviction, you can't start throwing around sweeping statements and defamatory comments about individuals. You've got to be very careful on that front. So we respected that. Frustrated as much as we might have been, for us, we'd achieved our objective.
Achieved the objective. So I'd imagine that in an instance like that, the guy who's on death row is willing to pay whatever the hell it takes, right? Even if it meant he had to spend every single last penny that he's made throughout his life, he doesn't give a shit because he just wants to get out of that place as fast as possible.
Agreed.
Right? But how much did he end up spending, if you're allowed to say?
Yeah, he would have spent, upwards of six figures.
Okay.
Yeah, not
Okay. Few hundred grand.
Yeah, a few $100,000.
Yeah.
Yes, ballpark, which is a combination of both legal fees and and our consultancy fees. Because you got travel in there, you got expenses, but these things, these aren't cheap problems to solve. But 9 times out of 10, the people that are involved in these problems have got more than enough collateral to support any investigation they want to. And of course, with that, you get asked for very strange requests. But
what's the most expensive job you've ever been assigned to?
Well, I suppose the big ones will obviously fetch sometimes into the millions.
Really?
And that's only because the length of time that they go over.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can see investigations spanning a number of years.
Yeah.
Complex probate matters when somebody dies and there's an argument between siblings around wealth.
Yeah.
And there's significant amounts of wealth, billions. That stuff takes years to solve because you've ultimately got siblings arguing and fighting over who's got what. What have they done previously? Should they be entitled to X? They want Y. There's a lot of toing and froing. We're there trying to understand if we can understand what the other side are doing, trying to get in amongst the reeds to gather that intelligence picture. Those jobs cost a fortune. No different to the security that you see for your Zuckerbergs and your Jeff Bezoses around. That stuff's eye-watering.
Really?
Very much so.
Would they, the likes of Elon, Zuckerberg, and Bezos, would they have a team like you constantly, on retainer, for example?
Yeah. So when you look at your Elon Musk, your Mark Zuckerbergs, your Jeff Bezoses of this world, not only have they got significant business empires, they've got significant personal empires, private jets. You look at Jeff Bezos, 2 yachts, significant infrastructure and assets they need protecting. So these guys demand the best, they need the best. You'll find a Zuckerberg or a Bezos reaching out to ex-Secret Service guys and girls, FBI specialists.
I can imagine that in his recent divorce, he would have had to have like a lot of help, right? Just to make sure that
they've got legal teams. You only have to look at, for instance, like Donald Trump. And I know he was the president, so now he gets a permanent close protection team, probably at the cost of the government. But it's a whole moving machine. You're talking about vehicles. What sort of vehicles do we need our client to travel in? Do they need to be bulletproof? Where are they traveling to? These protection teams, like for instance Elon Musk, will travel ahead of him to make sure security arrangements are in place to ensure that where he's staying is safe and secure. No one's listening to him. So I would almost guarantee that every hotel room he's staying in will be swept. Okay. Every boardroom he talks in will be isolated. There'll be someone standing at the front of it. We've seen, like his Twitter buyout led to him being able to shut down that young man who was constantly sharing where his private jet was. Wow. So that's the sort of stuff that they really want to bed down. And the cyber piece to them, in terms of the information security and where they are and what they're doing, is really unique. We call it creating them a bubble, that bubble of privacy and security. And if their security programs, which will be headed up by very, very experienced former Secret Service agents, particularly in the States, will cost in the millions to support.
Wow.
Millions.
So one of my friends from South Africa, and unfortunately last year, some of his family were on the way to school. And suddenly a car just suddenly pulls up in front of them, machine guns, bunch of guys, get the kids out, kidnap the kids. And it was big national news, so it's okay for me to say. But they were, taken away and kept for nearly a month until, the right ransom was negotiated and this, that and the other, right? Absolutely terrible scenario. But it's a common occurrence in South Africa. Most big business people are constantly under the threat of being kidnapped. Surely you guys get
him. And was missing for 48 hours until we were able to identify where he was. Honey trap, classic honey trap.
What's a honey trap?
So, good-looking young lady lures him to an apartment. So, we've been running an investigation in the Caribbean for the past few years for an Indian-born businessman who got Antiguan citizenship in 2021. He was living down there. He got his citizenship in 2018, but been living there for a couple of years. He was kidnapped, honey trap, which is classically, a young lady luring him to an apartment. Guys come in, swarm in, bash him up, tie him up, put him on a yacht, take him across to Dominica, where he's then handed over to authorities, arrested for entering illegally. Those charges have now been discontinued. And you think to yourself, this stuff is going on in the world. And that's the stuff that, we're brought in to investigate. And that is a proper crisis because you don't know where these individuals are for the first 48 hours. Now, we're very lucky. It wasn't the classic kidnapping in the sense of take them and then make a phone call and a ransom.
Yeah.
This was to circumnavigate the rule of law, to get them back to India, to ultimately hold him accountable for some allegations which they've been stipulating for a little while. So, there is no greater privilege or honour to support a family through such a significant crisis. And to get somebody back home alive. And there's another success story where we identified within sort of 72 hours where he was, deploy a legal team, deploy an investigations team, start speaking to people on the ground, understand the who, what, why, when and how that we always like to answer, then come up with a plan with the legal team to get him back home to Antigua so that we can start the investigations. And I have to be honest, if it wasn't for the incredibly brave people that exist in the Caribbean who could see what was going on and communicating through us, providing us with an intelligence picture which allowed us to formulate a plan and understand who the key players were, we wouldn't be in the position we were today in terms of with the client being able to return him back to Antigua. But they are the hair-raising jobs that cause the hair to stand up on the back of your neck because you know that this is life or death stuff. So do you have to then go up against governments? Like if a government wants somebody done, and that always comes up in the news at some point. It's normally Russia that needs to get their hands on somebody who's... There's a lot of, there's a lot of active state-based actors out there who get frustrated by the fact that they've got to adhere to the rule of law and will do anything they can politically motivated or not, to circumnavigate that. And, you know, and we've seen it here in the UK with the Russians and Salisbury. You know, we've seen it recently with the Indians in Canada with Justin Trudeau making allegations towards the Indian government. You know, we've seen plenty of examples of state-based actors committing really, really serious crimes against their own people in foreign jurisdictions. They're getting more brave, they're getting more brazen, and organisations like us at IonAsia are being utilised more to provide that security picture, to provide the intel that clients want to know. To what is that threat and risk picture like to me? How can I remain safe and secure in my own home? Do I need CCTV cameras? Should I have a full-time bodyguard? Should I have a bulletproof Range Rover?
What level of wealth do you then say that actually you need to start considering that stuff? Because let's be honest, it is about how much you're worth, right?
I'd agree. Yeah,
you know, it's funny with wealth. Normally, like when you've just made your first few mil, you know, you have this insatiable desire to just kind of let everybody know that you've just made a few mil, right? And then when you've actually made a lot more than that, your massive desire is to let people. How do I hide the fact that I'm worth that kind of money? Because you don't want that kind of attention. You don't want. You know,
and it's a very good point, and I think it's different for every particular client. I think most people it's down to personal choice as to sort of what you perceive that threat and risk picture to look like. I would suggest the minute you've got more money than you need to survive on, and you're able to demonstrate that with the assets you own, whether it be cars or houses or jewelry, you've got to start understanding and recognising the risk to your own personal safety. And it not only just you, it's also your family, wives and children's, because they will drive the nice cars. They will return to the big homes whilst you're away on business. So I think at that point that you've got more than enough money that people can visually see that your success. They see that you've got a big company with 100 employees or 50 employees. You know, that takes a lot to run, and it takes a lot of money and investment. So, you know, but there's different levels for that. You know, I would suggest there are plenty of very wealthy people out there that you and I would have no knowledge of their wealth because they stay under the radar. But there are others who, because of their public profile, because of maybe their business and the type of work they do, will be recognized as people that are seriously wealthy and can be a target. You know, and that's when they start looking at security provisions, CCTV camera, close protection, you name it. They start looking at it.
All right, so picture the scene. You're doing some surveillance. And somebody notices that you're onto them. Have you had that?
I had that in the very sort of almost the first job I had outside the police. So matrimonial matter, husband phones, I think my wife's cheating on me. I'm away for work a lot. He was what we call FIFO, fly in, fly out. I think when I'm flying out, she's up to no good. Can you watch her for a week? So I had a little Suzuki Swift, which I had black tinted out windows, proper dark. You couldn't see into the thing other than the main screen. And, you know, it's a normal suburban car. So you can sit I thought, sit in a normal street for a few hours, no one will know I'm here. And obviously, and this was in Australia, very hot, car's not on, no aircon. You sit in the back and you just sit there and relax and watch on. And I'd been outside this address for about 3 or 4 hours. And the car had come and gone.
Like typical like movie kind of scene.
So I've been there for 2 or 3 hours. I'm sweating. It's, you know, I'm having a drink. I really need the loo, but you know, that's just, you push through all that stuff. And then suddenly a car that had come and gone a couple of times from a neighbouring property. I see it started to get dark. I see this guy coming down the driveway, quite a long driveway, with a bat.
Oh wow!
And he comes roaring up to the car
from the house that you were.
No, from a neighbouring property. Okay. And literally starts smashing the car, the bumper. And I get out again. He's like, "You're here. You're trying to commit a burglary. You're sussing out our properties. Take your crime elsewhere." I said, "Mate, I'm not here. I came up very quickly with a story that I was a debt collector, waiting bizarrely for a Range Rover that I thought was registered in the area to come in here, so I could get a tow truck to take it away." So, like, he immediately sort of froze with this shock that he just smashed the pieces out of my car when I'm looking for a Range Rover. And then he processed the fact that he hadn't seen a Range Rover in his street forever. And said, "But there's no Range Rovers in this street." I said, "Well, this is the street I was given, mate. You know, I'm only here just to try and find this car." And I said, "And you've just dented my bumper with your bat." And he said, "Well, I suggest we just leave this and you leave." So I said, "All right, no worries, I'll go." And that was, the moment for me realizing that you're not invisible and things do move quickly, and then you've got to be able to talk you out of those situations. Come up with sort of really legitimate stories. Otherwise, you can find yourself in a really bad situation.
That's the most polite interaction ever. If that happened down here, somebody's going in, on the stretcher into the hospital, I think. Surely.
I had an incident in North London where I found 250 grams worth of wine about 18 months ago in a lockup.
Did you drink it?
No, well, I asked for it back, and the 3 guys that were sitting on the couch in this lockup all had guns tattooed on their hands, teardrop tattoos, people that I perceived stereotypically to be pretty bad. And I said, listen, fellas, is that wine for sale? And they said, what, you old Bill? You a cop. I was like, no, I used to be, but that's my client's wine, because my client had been defrauded this £250,000 worth of wine from Spain. Yeah. And I had to negotiate. And I had to call a mate of mine in, a Turkish lawyer who spoke Turkish with these guys. Yeah. And he said if I hadn't have had him beside me, he reckons I probably would have disappeared. So there's moments where you can find yourself in a really difficult situation.
Did you get the wine?
Well, that's another story in the fact of we did, but we had to pay 12 grand to get it back because we had to pay a holding fee.
12 versus 250.
Exactly. The client was prepared to carry that.
Yeah. Did he at least share a glass of wine with you at the end, though?
Yeah, they gave me a carton of wine. Oh, nice. 6 bottles. Lovely.
Nice.
Good
was
stuff.
It good?
Yeah, it was lovely.
So typically we've only talked about like billionaires and multimillionaires as clients, but are there others?
Yeah, there's a whole raft of different clients that I suppose we look after. In the London office here, I sort of specialise in private client work. So you're talking about people that have got high profiles. That if there's a story breaks, they're on the front page of the Sun or the Daily Mail or
politicians.
Actors. Politicians, actors, a lot of footballers that just we're seeing an increase in burglaries at footballers' homes. Crazy, so they're becoming big clients in terms of wanting our help in protecting their assets.
So like in Liverpool, because I support Liverpool, I remember there's been a few instances where the players have like flown out because there's a away game, Europe or whatever, and literally the second they get onto the flight, their house is burgled because they just know they're not going to be at home, right?
Yeah, and that stuff is obviously there's a fixtures list which is advertised, so people know when they're going to be home and away. So I think footballers, particularly ones that I have contact with here in London, particularly, they're very mindful of that, and they don't want to have to worry about that security stuff. Most of the clients I have who are of wealth or of profile, security is the last thing they want to worry about. But they know it exists, and they know they've got to invest into it to make sure that they don't lose more, or importantly their family safety is the biggest thing, as you can imagine. So for those high profile guys and girls, it's about just giving them that peace of mind and that sort of security blanket that they need in putting provisions in place that ensure their safety and their family safety. But in terms of clients, and there's a whole raft of them, from pop stars to footballers to a movie star to huge businessmen and women who have got incredible success, and with that comes a level of risk and support that they need.
So we recently had to call you because we had a client that couldn't help but feel that somebody was listening to him and that he'd lost out on deal after deal. He's a property developer, and so he'd lost deals, and he just couldn't work out. He thought that he was the only person that knew about these deals before they went onto the open market, and he decided to bring the car in because it was playing up anyway. So, and then you guys came in and you sweeped his car, right?
We did. So I worked with Bruce on that one. It was a fascinating insight in terms of here you've got a guy who the car is playing up, something's wrong with the phone. People, as you say, you tell the story very well in the sense of it would appear he was very paranoid that people were knowing about his business decisions and private phone calls that he was having in his car. So we brought down all the gear and set up with Bruce with this Lamborghini, and within about, I'm going to say 10, 12 minutes, found a listening device under the carpet of the car, which had been capturing all his conversations for however long that thing had been in there for. So then you remove that device, then we find a tracker under the car. So here we've got a real life case scenario of an individual that's got a significant business portfolio where somebody has got a vested interest in not only knowing where he is, but listening into his conversations, a device which they could phone into activate and then listen into his private calls. So they know when the vehicle's moving because they got the tracker on it, so they know when to call into it. So we had two bits and pieces that we found there. Remove those, give him total peace of mind. But then the real investigation starts in trying to identify who on earth is behind this, and then you start looking at the people that he may have had.
How can you, is there any way to trace back from the...
Yeah, there is. From the SIM,
mic
so the SIM cards that appear in those devices have an IMEI number, a reference number. So we use those to then start our investigations and work with the police to try and identify who these people are, because they're committing really, really serious offences. Really? So and that's, and then from that you go, well, if the car's been compromised, I've got to do my home, I've got to do my commercial property. It then becomes this whole sort of corporate espionage investigation, quite legitimately. A chap that's investing hundreds of millions in property portfolios has got people that are trumping him, as you quite rightly say, ahead of deals. So that's just one example where we've supported you and come in and helped a client with a real issue.
Hi guys, these cars are very expensive. It could be a dream car or your life saving on that car. Now, how do you protect that car and make sure the car doesn't get stolen? If a thief tries to steal one of your cars, so the first thing they will do is get inside the car and get into the electronics and try to code a key. If they don't code the key, they will deimmobilize the system in order to turn the ignition with a screwdriver. Basically, if a tracker's fitted on your car and a thief has gone inside your car and he's just deimmobilized the system and he's nicked your car, you will get a time frame. Around about 4 hours, you can still see a location of your car. But my suggestion is not having one tracker, have few trackers in the car. So I had an incident with a Bentley Bentayga where the car was stolen and recovered, where the customer had 3 trackers in the car. So the thief had gone into the car, has ripped out all the wiring and all the control modules, the tracker unit, the Vodafone system from main dealer and everything, and thought, yeah, I'm safe, I've now nicked the car. The customer literally within 3 hours found where the car was located. He picked the car up, brought it down to me, and I've done all the wiring and checked. There was one tracker hidden away, which it depends on the tracker fitter as well. It's about how much you pay. Sometimes you can get a tracker fitted around about £300. The tracker fitter will come, fit it quickly on a car within an hour, and he will take your money and walk away, job done, you've got a tracker fitted on your car. But it doesn't mean you're still safe, because the tracker is like a virus. You're meant to hide it in your car. Say like I fitted the tracker on this. I will make sure I'll get another technician and I'll call him over and say, find the tracker on the car. If you can find it, I'm not fitting it right. So I have to hide the virus inside the car safely, securely, where nobody could get into it easily. I'm not trying to sell you a tracker. I'm just advising you to fit few or couple of trackers, so at least you get time. Or say like an immobilizer system with a tracker, it would take time for the thief to break into your car. Breaking into your car, it could take literally a couple of minutes, 3 minutes if a professional thief. If you have a tracker with an immobilizer, it could take him up to 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes even half an hour. So if anyone's tampering around with your car, you can call the police straight away, or you can catch him out, you can come outside your house, whatnot. That's the first thing you want to stop, where you want to delay the process of getting your car stolen. The second thing is that when the car is stolen, you want to make sure you have enough time to locate the car. Also, there's another way of preventing your car from getting stolen. What is it? Keyless entry. If I say keyless entry, I can get inside the car without pressing a button. I can go close to the car and the door will open. Now, if you turn the keyless entry off, you can't do that. You'll have to physically get your key out and press the unlock button to open the door. Anybody can code your keys and then get the key code and literally go past your car and the car will open. So if you deactivate the keyless entry, you'll need a key to open the barrel. If you don't have the key, you can't get in the car, otherwise you'll have to break the window. My final advice would be getting a tracker, getting a few trackers fitted on your car, fitting an immobilizer on your car, get a good steering lock for your car. Do not leave your keys laying around in your front of the house area, which means the shoe area or the main living room. Make sure it's in the back of the house so nobody can code the keys. Sixth will be keyless entry. Turn that off and that will save you from a lot of hassle.
Guys, I just want to take a quick second just to mention that this episode is being sponsored by IonAsia. It's a brilliant company that we've used, had massive success with so far. They specialize in security risk management and corporate investigations. They obviously cover everything that we've covered in this podcast so far, but it also extends to corporate fraud, money laundering, due diligence, and much, much more. So if any of our audience has any of these kinds of issues, make sure that you give them a call.
So now we're on to a segment where I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions. Yeah. What has been your most creative or unconventional way of gathering intel?
Pretending to be a London motorbike courier, going to someone's house trying to deliver a letter to show they're living there or not.
Okay. Were they upset when you delivered it?
No, well, it was a legitimate parcel just with magazines in it that we'd put together.
Okay. Favorite supercar brand and why?
I can't look past a McLaren, quintessentially because I was a huge fan of Ayrton Senna.
Okay. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever received from someone?
Never stop learning and never stop meeting new people.
I like that. What's one unique talent that you have that people don't know about you?
I run my own podcast, Protect and Serve.
Okay.
And that's for the police.
Correct.
Interesting.
And it's called Protect and Serve, and it's on Spotify.
Correct.
Your favorite way to unwind after work?
Watching cricket, whether it's the Big Bash, whether it's the 100, whether it's the IPL. I'm a huge cricket nut, and just sitting back and I support England and any team playing Australia.
What's the toughest decision that you've ever had to make in business?
Letting people go that aren't the right fit is always a really difficult conversation to have.
And what's the most bizarre or unusual request that you've ever received from one of your clients?
They're endless, but people are always wanting you to bug people's phones, and I once got asked if we could seize back an aeroplane from Cuba, which is near on impossible.
So they wanted you to go to Cuba,
And recover
somehow hijack that plane,
and
bring it back.
Recover a jet, which is in Cuba's impossible. Very dangerous.
Unless you're related to Castro.
Job's on.
So that was such an interesting podcast. Thank you for coming on. It's crazy to learn about some situations that, these high net worth individuals have to go through sometimes. It's unbelievable to think that, you could have videos intercepted, or, you could get kidnapped while you're out in the Bahamas. G-Wagons turning up in Cambodia, and, there's actually people that can fly out there and recover that vehicle for you. I never knew that was even a thing. The way that the common perception is that once your car's gone, it's gone. So don't even bother, right? So it's been very informative today and eye-opening. So thank you.
No, thanks very much indeed for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure sharing some of these sort of crazy stories of our lives at IonAsia. It's something new every day.
Hopefully I get rich enough that I might need to use you. But up until that point, yeah.
If I see you, it's generally a problem.
Yeah. So there you have it, guys. If you have any of these kinds of problems, you know who to call. Ollie the Fixer. And I hope you like